two superintendents of two deep South states, Alabama and Mississippi, here on the stage with us. Um, they have formed a good relationship. They talk a lot, and we're learning from one another. But I wanted to, I grew up in Alabama and was always sad to read, the litany of stories about how we ranked poorly on every measure, and we had that unfortunate phrase, "Thank God for Mississippi." That was rude. We shouldn't have been saying that, but but it made us feel better. I think one of the things that after having moved back to Alabama, watching the progress on the Alabama Reading Initiative, Alabama reading reaching fourth grade reading at the national average on the NAEP, it really changed the narrative. We don't have to be at the bottom. And as Ryan said, those were Alabama kids and Alabama school teachers who were resourced with a sound plan, with the personnel, the training needed to deliver. And I think that, that in 2011, when those results came out, I felt like we had really changed the narrative, and I was sad to see that we kind of drifted after that. But I kept my eye on Mississippi, that was also tracking and making progress. And in subsequent years, they were able to surpass us. And so on both reading and math, at the fourth and the eighth grade level, Mississippi students outscore Alabama students. We know Alabama kids are just as smart as those kids in Mississippi. And we know that Mississippi kids have demonstrated they're just as smart as kids around the country. And so we've got to find the right resources and and we wanted to bring that and the right approach, and we got to bring that to Alabama. And so we brought Carey Wright, the superintendent since 2013 in Mississippi. And Carey, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you got started in your experience before Mississippi and coming to Mississippi, that kind of change and transformation of attitudes.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. So I've been in education all my life. Started out as a teacher, became an assistant principal, a principal, director of student services and special education, associate superintendent, chief academic officer in the District of Columbia Public Schools. So it's always been part of my life to focus on children, because I am a steadfast believer. I know we said the 95%, but I'm a steadfast believer that 100% of children can learn and thrive, even those with significant disabilities. And I've seen that happen. You've got to, for me, it's such a belief system. It's part of my life. And that when I arrived in Mississippi, I came from Maryland. Most of my career was in Maryland, and worked in two of probably the most outstanding school systems in the nation, Howard County Public School System and then Montgomery County Public School System. Montgomery County's school system has 165,000 kids, and it is quite a challenge, as you can imagine. But those two school systems, I knew what excellence looked like. And then when I got to DC, it was like, whoa, you mean, what do you mean we aren't replacing windows that are broken? What do you mean that we're paying people that have been dead for 10 years? I mean, it was stark for me. And then to look at what was happening in the classrooms and what was not happening in the classrooms. So when I got the call to apply for this job, I thought, well, I know what excellence looks like, and I also know what it doesn't look like. And Mississippi was literally 50th in the nation. I mean, we were smack dab on the bottom. And I just had a belief that my skill sets were such that I could make a difference. I believe that in the bottom of my heart. But you also need to know I was raised by a mother from when I could learn early age. You can do anything you want to do. You can achieve anything you want to achieve. So I grew up my whole life going, oh, okay. So if I'm going to do the next job and mom's saying, you can do that, then I came down to Mississippi with it. We can do this. In fact, my chief of staff and I had this conversation in the car within the second year I was here. I said, we can so do this. But it was this culture of low expectations for children. And I believe that they were capable of doing more. But we had to develop some consistency in what was happening. And that's where we really focused on the literacy aspect, and we can certainly talk about that. The letters training was part of it, but special ed came alongside of us with phonics first. So it was a partnership with special education as well as general education. And I believed that we needed to have the same message going out for all teachers. I realized that districts can provide their own PD. But for me, and the state had not taken a strong role in this, so I thought, well, we are. So we're going to provide the professional development. And so that's when we then made the decision that letters training was going to be it after the Literacy-Based Promotion Act was passed. And we made the decision to hire the coaches. We did not release that money to the locals. So that was a decision that we kept with us. We hired because I wanted to be assured of quality, to be honest with you. And we've got some of the best and brightest. So it was a very, and coaching has been a huge strategy of ours. We now have math coaches. We've got special ed coaches. We've got school improvement coaches. I've got early childhood coaches. I've got digital learning coaches that go out and teach about digital literacy. So, but coaching has been a big strategy, but that's really, we decided to develop a very strong strategic plan and then stick to it. And I wasn't about chasing rabbits, and I wasn't about throwing something up against the wall and hoping that it was going to stick, because there was too much research out there about how children learn, and that's where we focused.
I've noticed that you mentioned the strategic plan, and every January, y'all publish the superintendent's statement, and you get the numbers from the previous year. How has that played into your management style, the kind of keeping a consistent kind of presentation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one of the things that I have started doing probably for about the past, say, 6 years, my whole focus has been on return on investment. And so even when I testify before the legislature, I don't ask for money first. That's not why I'm there. I'm there saying, you gave me $15 million in the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. Here's your return on investment. Because I think that resonates with people. So you gave me this money. This is what I did with it. Here are the outcomes. And I do that with every single thing that the legislature has given me is a return on investment. So when I go before the board for our strategic plan update, and we do that every year, I let them know, here's your return on investment. Here's what we've done. Here's what the agency has done. Here's what our districts are doing. And here's the results that we've got. So I think that, to me, the bottom line is our students achieving. And how long are you going to let this go on if you're not seeing something working? And I'm not patient where that's concerned. And so I am one about, if you're going to be using money and I'm going to be, fiscally responsible for the money that I've been given, then are the children in my life seeing a better result based on what we're doing? And it's not that all teachers, I believe every teacher wants to come to school every single day to do the very best that they can. No doubt. But there are some that have bigger gifts than others. But that doesn't mean that those that don't have those same gifts can't learn. So one of our key strategies is a building capacity strategy of teachers and leaders, because I believe that you can build those capacities in people. And that's been a part of what we talk about when we talk about that with our board. Like what kind of professional development have we been providing, and what are we seeing as a result? And are we seeing student achievement rise?
That kind of goes to the accountability piece, the idea of being supportive and helping people grow, but also holding them accountable for results. How does Mississippi handle maybe lack of progress in some places, or
Well, we're very transparent with data, and I'm a firm believer that accountability drives the behaviors that you want to see in schools. So our accountability model, if you take a look at it, at the high school level, there's a big emphasis on graduation rates. And so that gets people focusing on, okay, how many kids are we having that are graduating? We've got a huge portion of our accountability model that focuses on the growth of the lowest 25% in English language arts and in mathematics. So when we first implemented this, I would say to superintendents, When you're out visiting principals, the first question that you need to ask is, have you identified your lowest 25%? And if the answer is yes, then say, show me the list, and then say, what are you doing about it? Because behind every data point is a face. We cannot look at things in the aggregate. We can't just look at what all African-American children are doing or all students with disabilities are doing, because you've got to drill down to that face that's that point, because what Carey needs is going to be different than what Eric needs. And it can't be simply because Carey and Eric are white that we both need the same thing. And so that's part of what we've been trying to get our teachers and leaders to do, is really look at what are the interventions that you're providing to each and individual child, K-12, pre-K-12, actually. Because it's, in the letters training I wanted to share with you also, I've now got my middle school and high school teachers asking for this training because they have seen the power of what's happening and they know that wasn't their training. And they said, we've got kids that are struggling. Can we come to take your letters training as well? So we have set aside slots for our middle school and high school because that training has really made a difference in the lives of children.
And so what has been the force you think that has driven, is it coming from the community that has drives improvement, that the demand for higher expectations, does it come down from above or from below or
down from above? I would say, I think the power of our change is that we started changing beliefs about children and about what children were capable of doing. And when our scores started coming up, people were like, whoa, look, they came up again this year. Whoa, they came up again the next year. And before the pandemic, there wasn't an indicator that Mississippi wasn't monitoring that wasn't on the rise. And so that now communities started to see it happened in all communities, not just some communities. And that was the power of our NAEP scores in 2019. When Mississippi has the highest rate of poverty in the nation. And when the NAEP scores came out in 2019, our children in poverty, be they Black, white, or Hispanic, outperformed all of their peers nationally. So that sent a very powerful message. Yeah. And I've said, we can't use poverty as an excuse. And, I've said to people, we've got to take control over what we can take control over, and that is the school day. So what do we do in this school day that makes it the best that it can be for every single child that's sitting there? When I was a principal, I used to say to my teachers, pretend that today is the only day that this child has. Because when 3:30 comes, you can't get it back. So it's got to be the best. And then the next day, it's got to be the best. And so I think once our scores started coming up, and I think the belief system started to change, and the nation really started saying, oh my gosh, what's happening in Mississippi, that people started saying it's working. So maybe we really need to pay attention to what's happening. And we've been transparent with data, and we have recognized schools and districts that are doing well. I'm a big believer in, praising people that deserve all that praise. I may be the face of what's going on, but I'm not the work of what's going on. My department is the work, superintendents are the work, principals are the work, teachers are the work, parents are the work. It's all of us together. And so I think that's a part of that message that has to be sent. We cannot do this without you. And whoever that you is that's standing in front of us, if that's a teacher, then it's a teacher. And if it's a principal, then it's a principal. But it's us doing this work.
How have your universities been involved in preparing those teachers?
So that 50% thing kind of resonated with me. Universities are just a little slower, I think, to work. And we've got great relationships with all of ours, don't misunderstand me. But, when you're trying to get your educator prep programs to start teaching the science of reading, and forget what you call it, there is a science to teaching reading. And you've got some professors that are looking back at you and saying, I don't need to know that. And because I've got a doctoral degree, or I don't need to know that because I believe in whole language. Now, those of you that are sitting out there that don't, that's the biggest scare. Balanced literacy, you could almost understand somebody coming back with, but whole language, which has not worked anywhere in the nation. So we keep working with our educator prep programs. but it's been a little painful. And so what we've tried to do on our end, since we are the grantor, if you will, of their accreditation programs, so we've tried to come at it in another direction of educator prep program evaluation, and then also looking at all of our teachers to get their license have to pass the Foundations of Reading Assessment, looking now at adding that to our website, pass rate by first time pass, so that we can be transparent with their data as well as with our own data.
Have you gotten any complaints that in this shift to structured literacy, that we've lost some of the joy of exploring literature and reading and uptake on reading? Are you hearing that,
Oh,
Eric?
she's asking it. No, absolutely not. I mean, I think it's the exact opposite. What we hear from teachers is that they, teachers, as Carey said, teachers want their children to succeed. There are no teachers that go to school and say, well, I don't want my kids to learn today. They all do. Now we're giving them the skills. They're seeing children that had not progressed, not saying they didn't believe they could progress, but with the skills the teacher had, with the knowledge that the child came to the classroom, they weren't progressing. Now they're seeing those children progress. We're hearing from teachers, they love it. And it's not this idea that if you really teach children to read through the science of reading, they won't be exposed to great literature. How are they going to be exposed to great literature if they can't read? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, there's so much rich literature out there. And I think that's the beauty of it. You can take a book that's above a child's head in terms of their reading ability and make it come alive, with teaching all the skills that we know that we need them to teach. And that's the one thing that I say to teachers. Don't necessarily read to children on something that is, if you're a second grade teacher, read it a second grade book. Pick a fourth grade book, because the whole idea that you mentioned about vocabulary, a big N versus enormous, right? And that's really, I think, to Eric's point, is we use literature, rich literature, to teach children to read.
Did y'all do Strong Leaders? Strong Readers,
Readers.
Strong Leaders is a great website out there. Mississippi developed it. That is a resource for parents as well. By grade level, you can kind of look at the activities you should be doing with your child to help them grade appropriately. But was that part of a larger public campaign to encourage
yeah.
literacy?
Yeah, we went all out. I mean, we traveled around the state. We had parent nights all over the state. Our Strong Readers website, I would strongly encourage the gentleman in the back to take a look at that. And I even made a note after listening to Steve. I want to come up with a strong leaders website for parents so that we can do that at a grade level. But I think that it was an all out. We've created resources. We have created our professional development. If you go on our website, it is massive about the amount of PD that we're providing. And it was an all out campaign. I mean, it was not only what we could do to make parents aware and teachers aware and leaders aware, but it was then how do we support them in this effort to get them to where they need to be. So we made an assumption that no one knew it, even though there may have been some that knew how to teach the science of reading. We made an assumption that no one knew it. And then how do we provide the best professional development that we possibly could to get them there? But it was and continues to be. And I say to any of you that are involved in education, even our Early Learning Collaborative Act, for you that are in the business world, had a tax credit, one-to-one tax credit. So if you are a business that's near a local early learning collaborative or an early childhood program that we've sponsored, and you give money to that collaborative, you get a tax credit one-to-one for each of your dollars. And so when we first started out, that was the way we got the business community involved. We had, I think the first year may have been like $275,000 or $275,000. Now we're over $6 million that businessmen and women are contributing to early learning collaboratives to further the advancement of children. And that's been because they've seen the results.
I lost my train of thought.
Which is, well, while you're getting your train of thought.
Yeah.
So that is a great project and something we've talked about. One of the things in this discussion we were getting ready for today, talking with Tom and his team. So that early learning collaborative is what we call here, that's our first class pre-K. Department of Early Childhood Education. I think Dr. Cooper's here somewhere. So we all work together. We work now in Mississippi, they're aligned a little differently. Their Department of Education, they're what we would call pre-K, is part of the Department of Education. And I want to bring that up because people say, well, you have to do well, what do we need? No, we don't need to necessarily do it that way. We have a great Department of Early Childhood Education here. We have really good, strong partnerships. But the end goal is the same. How do you engage families? How do you get children, every child in pre-K, an opportunity to go to pre-K? Let parents understand the importance of pre-K. So in some communities, we've found the waiting list is not very long. So people say, well, there's nobody on the waiting list. But are there parents out there who need it, who don't know that they need it? So we work closely with Dr. Cooper and her team. And then in school, as Carey was talking about, how do we continue to work with parents? We've done this, some of you have visited maybe our website that we did. There's several state agencies worked together and created Alabama Family Central, a website we run through the Alabama Partnership for Children, and there are activities on there. But then how do you make sure people have, just because it's on a website, do they know where the website is? Do they have broadband at home so they can access the website? So there are all these other issues we're continually working on, and it's never done. And by now you've probably got your thought back. So we've created lots of early childhood activities, take-home activities, parent activities. But if next year we're offering all the same activities that we're offering this year and none other, then we've failed, because we've got to constantly be reevaluating and reassessing and thinking, what else do parents need? Where are there parents that don't know, or who don't know these resources are available, who don't have internet? How do we get to them too? You're constantly trying to continue to get better, to reach out, to reach more people. And that's what makes it a success, especially for children in poverty. And that's where our states have a lot in common. We have great high-performing schools, but we have lots of children in poverty. Most of our children are in poverty, most of our children. And that's different. I promise I'll get off this soapbox, but I know of the maybe 400 people in the room, I know 100 of you personally. I mean, I look out, I know these faces. Some of you are close friends. Some of our board members are here. We've got university people here. Lots of people, all of us in this room and our children are pretty well privileged. They are, and most of them, even if we did our jobs poorly, and I say we as an education community, your kids are going to learn to read and do math and be fine anyway. But what keeps us up at night are the kids that don't have those resources. And sometimes their parents, their child is coming to school unprepared for kindergarten. The parent doesn't know their child's not prepared for kindergarten. They just know they go to kindergarten. And so we know that we do kindergarten assessment. That's one of the things we've put in place with the Department of Early Childhood in the last couple of years, is an assessment of all of our kindergartners called ALA-Kids. And we know that our students come into kindergarten behind the national average in math and phonemic awareness, pre-reading skills. They enter kindergarten behind. So the teachers got to build all that up. And so we have to, now I'm not our pre-K kids. They actually come in above the national average, which is why we want them in a pre-K classroom. But the average child comes in way behind. So we've got to get parents engaged. We've got to get the community engaged. And everybody has to be a part of it. There's enough success to go around.
Yes, I remember my question. And before we open it up to the rest, to the audience, what are y'all doing about the holdback provision in the Literacy Act in Mississippi in light of COVID?
So last year, you told me just because of COVID, period. Okay. Well, so let me just say one thing about the retention law. You will never hear anybody in the department even mention the word retention. We talk about prevention and intervention. So we do not talk about retention because it does nothing but freak parents out, freak students out, freak teachers out. And I said, that's not the idea. The idea is if we get teachers teaching the standards in kindergarten and first grade and second grade, that by the time they get to third grade, they should be in good shape. but need to intervene and provide prevention activities for those children very early on. When COVID hit, we did not assess in 20. 21, we did assess, but we waived the passing of the third grade because we had an executive order from the governor at the time. We waived the passing of the order of that part of the law in 21. But in 22, we're getting ready to start next month with our statewide assessments. That is back in play. And so unless there's a good cause exemption, if children are not passing that third grade assessment, then they will be retained in third grade. But that being said, what I've said to my team, even when we started providing this, what third graders that get retained don't need is just another year of third grade. Because obviously that didn't work. So what are we going to be doing differently to those third graders that have to be retained? And what are we doing to those fourth grade teachers and students who by good cause exemption, who are still below grade level, get promoted to fourth grade? So those teachers are going to need some support. How do we work with kids that are below grade level? Those students are going to need something different because they may be on grade level in mathematics. So we've taken the approach, what's the professional development that we can provide those third grade teachers and those fourth grade teachers that's going to help them in both places. And that's really been our approach all along. And I've just got to say to my dear friend here, I have been so envious of his early childhood program, you have no idea. Because the first time that Mississippi put public money into early childhood, now realize I came from DC that had universal pre-K. I'd been in Maryland my entire career that already had pre-K. First time public money was put into pre-K in Mississippi was 2013. So when I look at the amount of money that you are so blessed to have, and we've been asking for, and because of our results, we've been getting more and more money, but I can only imagine, because ours is the same thing, we have 2 out of every 3 kids coming into kindergarten and aren't prepared. But our pre-K kids are knocking it out of the park. And so I say, imagine if we had high quality pre-K for every 4-year-old in the state, what could our kindergarten teachers do? And then much less what our first grade teachers, second grade teachers, so on up could do.
Do we have questions from the audience? Yes, Will?
So our charter schools are all public schools, and we have a charter authorizer board that's separate and apart from our state board that authorizes our charters. And so right now, almost all of our charters, not all, but almost all of our charters are in Jackson because that's where the population rises. But we've got 2 or 3 of our charters that are in more of our Delta area. But they're treated just like any other public school is treated.
Hi, Corinna Bryan, A+ Education Partnership. Dr. Wright, I know that high quality instructional materials aren't the end all be all, but it has been a huge part of the effort in Mississippi. Can you talk a little bit about how important that has been?
Yeah, thank you. That has been something that's been, and let me also say before I forget, anything that is on our website, and I say this no matter where I speak, anything, any resource, any document that's on our website, please take a look at it. And if you want it, take it down, take Mississippi's name off of it, put Alabama's name on it, and use it. Because we're all in this to make sure that all children are learning. So I want to say that first. But high quality instructional materials, we really took we've been involved with the Council of Chief State School Officers with that program, but we really wanted teachers, and it really paid off for us, I think, when the pandemic hit. We created our own website, which is up there too. So it's Mississippi Instructional Materials, and we vetted materials because what teachers were doing, God love them, they were yanking everything they could off the internet, right? And there was no quality control. So we wanted to, we developed a rubric then now that we are providing training on, so that if they're getting ready to use a piece of material in their classroom, they can use this rubric to identify whether A, is it aligned to our standards, because that's huge, and then B, is it of the rigor and quality that it needs to be. So we've done that in both English language arts and mathematics. And anytime then that we get high quality materials, that goes up on our website and all teachers are able to access that. But having HQIM, but high quality instructional materials. Having that as a piece of a teacher's knowledge, that's going to improve what's happening in the classroom, because we don't want them just using anything in the classroom. We want them to be thoughtful about the materials that they're bringing in and they're exposing their children to. So the HQIM work has been a real part of what we've done.
And I have to jump in here and brag on our 3 board members sitting somewhere here. So we actually had a state law that pretty much forbade us from doing that until last week. And our school board has been pushing for that for 2 years. We've been working with legislators to help them understand why we as a department need the authority to vet high quality instructional materials, why that's important. And it passed the legislature last week and the governor's committee to sign it. And so I want to point out that's how, so there's a policy role here. And our board understood that, and they talked to legislators, and that is not a sexy piece of legislation to pass. Textbook and High Quality Instructional Materials Reform Act. But so it takes time to help people understand why those policy pieces also need to be in place. But we're very excited. We claimed a victory lap last week. I'm very excited about that.
Do y'all how does that, is it are any high quality materials kind of either ratified by the state board in Mississippi or?
No, it's really department
compelled?
driven, and it's obviously optional. I mean, but I think over the period of time, I believe, because I've got a huge teacher advisory committee. I've got about 400 teachers on my teacher advisory committee and about 100 kids on my student advisory committee. And so I get a lot of input from them. But I think over a period of time, they've come to trust the department to provide, I'm going to call it high quality resources for them, so that when we put that up there, that's usually a place that they're going to go and look. But we're not mandating that they do that. We don't mandate curriculum. So that's a local decision. And that's hard sometimes for parents to understand, because I get a lot of those calls, why are we doing XYZ? And it's like, they want me to intervene, and no, that's not my job. You need to talk to your local school board and your local superintendent and your local principal. But we really do mandate our standards. Now that's something that we feel strongly about. We approve that, we push that. And I say to teachers, don't bother with test prep. You cannot prep for this kind of test that's administered statewide. If you do nothing every day, then teach the standards. You don't have to worry about the statewide assessment.
Joe?
Hi, it's Joel again. I promise I'm not a plant. I'm still a teacher in my heart. I know we're losing a lot of teachers right now. And I know one of the provisions of the pathways to 4th grade looks a lot like the kind of paperwork I had to do when I was a special ed teacher. So when you're talking about support for a kindergarten teacher whose classroom is high needs, in a Title I school, for example, or a 3rd grade teacher who's got a lot of kids that are behind, if we're adding to the paperwork load, what are we giving back? What are we doing in exchange? What does that support look like to keep them in the classroom?
Well, I don't know that I would say that there's a lot of paperwork to that. I think that particularly with students with disabilities, they've already got an IEP. That's been documented, very well with that. English language learners, once you've identified them, if they've not had sufficient instruction. So that we try to remove those paper barriers. I was in charge of special education for 10 years as an associate superintendent, as a director. And if there's anybody and having a teacher's heart, that's the one thing that's always bugged the daylights out of me, is that teachers are having way too much paperwork to do. So that, to me, if that's an impediment, then we need to solve that problem. And then the way that we try and provide support to teachers then is through professional development. So, and also putting out interventions that are research-based. I've got on our website, if you're a principal or you're a teacher and you're looking for particular intervention for your children, those are on our website, and those are all research-based interventions to use for children. We've produced a lot of resources for teachers around how to work with children that are struggling. I've got an Access for All 2.0 guide. So if you're looking for something that has something to do with behavior as well as academics, it gives teachers all kinds of ideas about how to work and strategies to work with children. So we've really listened to teacher feedback, and then as a department come back and created those resources and push them back out to teachers, so that we listen a lot and try and make sure that their lives are as easy as it can be, because it's not easy.
And in general, both of you, how are we encouraging more people to get into the teaching profession? I mean, the manpower shortage throughout the economy is bad, but especially in the teacher profession, we need them.
We have, let me quickly, I just want to address that. And I want to say something about how we're recruiting people to be teachers. I did learn from the slides earlier that I think Laura Wolf put up, we have 2% of our teachers would like to transfer to Mississippi, but we want some in exchange. We have, one of the things since the passage of the Alabama Literacy Act, which was a great and huge deal for our state, but it does require a lot of reporting from teachers. I'm thinking that may be where that question came from. And the numeracy bill, which is also very good and is moving through, we believe will be law very soon, does require, there are like 2 pages of reporting requirements for teachers to do monthly and quarterly. And we are hearing from teachers who are freaking out a little bit about that. We're addressing it really 2 ways. One, as we go through the process, we obviously want to collect a lot of data. Are those data collections providing useful feedback for student achievement? And the ones that are not, we will, in time, we're already sorting through some of those. We're hearing from some teachers, look, these data we're collecting are really important. These we're not sure help. So we'll go back to the legislature and say, can we make some changes on those things in time? The second thing we're trying to do is see how much of that we can automate. It's amazing how much more we have these phones and computers around us that we're supposed to make our lives easier. They just create more work, but there've got to be ways to automate a lot of that data collection process. And so we have a team at our department now working on that. How can we automate more of that? It's not an immediate turnaround. That is the #1 complaint we hear from teachers. And I understand that, because we've got teachers who are spending their Sunday mornings working on data. So we get that, but we're going to get there. But we can't throw out the good work that's going on too. We do have to sort through that and make sure what's working, what do we maybe not have to collect, and we'll work with the legislature on amending some of those things going forward. And I think they're open to that. It's just like that high quality instructional materials. There was not anybody in the legislature that was like, oh, we don't need to get high quality materials to our kids. It's complex, and it takes time to build some of those things and work through them. Okay, teacher recruitment. I got to say just a little bit. We're spending a lot, point to my board members again, we're spending a lot of time working on that. We've made some huge changes. We had a big discussion yesterday. The board will be voting based on our work session yesterday on some changes next month. That will be the biggest overhaul of teacher preparation probably in 50 years with the on top of things the board has done in the last year or so. We got some changes from the legislature we need. There's another bill moving through now that we need. So trying to open the pipeline, and that work is being done. We've some great, we don't want to be all down on the colleges that are here too. So we're always pushing them, but we have some university partners that have really been helpful in helping us figure out how we open up that pipeline and get more people in. The deans of education tell us that with these changes, the board's looking at we can probably recruit between 200 and 500 more teachers immediately. Dean Katie Kinney from UNA said, if the board passes this, I will have 50 more people I have to find teacher placements for immediately. And so that is a problem. I'm sorry, that's her problem, but it's a problem I want her to have. She's just got to talk to superintendents and figure it out. Now, so opening the pipe, we can do. The problem is, once we open the pipe, is the water trickling through or is the water streaming through? So we have to also find ways to encourage young people to become teachers. Somebody's, I think, already said it this morning. We find the biggest impediment. When I started as a teacher, I started out as a high school chemistry and physics teacher. Teachers, when I was in high school, I had teachers encouraging me to become a teacher. And we've lost a lot of that. We don't have teachers recruiting their students to become teachers. So we've got to change the feeling and the concepts around our profession. So teachers are saying, this is a great profession. It's life-changing. You need to become a teacher. We have to be, as a society, we have to really change the whole dynamic around getting people in. One more thing, and I want Dr. Wright to talk about it because we're stealing ideas from there. And we're stealing ideas for teacher, to get teachers from anywhere, because this is a national crisis. It's not just Alabama. But you need to know that today, 37% of our teachers could walk out and retire. 37% could walk out and retire. We have the lowest number of people in teacher preparation programs that we've ever had in history. Actually, that's not true, because it actually, after we made some changes last year, it ticked up. It was 2 years ago, it was the lowest it had ever been. The changes the board's put in place have actually increased that. But we've got to get more people, as I said, in that pipeline. But we also know this. This is an interesting stat to me. I love stats. The math, they was making me break out in a little bit of a sweat over there doing math problems out loud. But 41% of our teachers have been hired since January of 2013. 41% of our teachers have been hired since. So we've got a lot of young teachers, and 37% can retire right now. And we've got a lot of, I won't say old, senior teachers, experienced teachers. But we have a crisis. It could be a real dramatic crisis soon. We have to recruit more people to come in to the pipeline. And if you have ever been a teacher and you let your teaching certificate lapse, one of the changes we made is for 2 years, we're giving 2 years amnesty. You can get your teaching certificate back. Since we rolled that out in January, we have literally had hundreds of people to call and say, how is it that I get my teaching certificate reinstated? Now, how many of them will actually follow through? We don't know, but that's been interesting that people have said, yes, I want my teaching certificate back.
The one thing that we've done.
Can I say real quick? We're going to have lunch in just a second. We're going to need to move for lunch. So make it quick.
Got it. Okay, I'm good at that. I talk fast anyway. We established a teacher residency program. Actually, the Kellogg Foundation, somebody mentioned philanthropy earlier, gave us some seed money about 4 years ago to start a teacher residency program. And with that, we are paying full tuition, full books, fees, et cetera. It's a 2-year program. And those teachers that come out of that will have their master's degree in both elementary ed and special ed. And now we're using our ARPA money. We just passed almost $10 million to establish that with 5 different universities. And by the end of that 2-year term, we will have an additional 200 teachers that will be coming out of that teacher residency program. So that is something that has really been huge for us.
Well, all of these panels could have gone all day long, I think. And thank y'all so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.